they really helped me push through getting through the year.
Moses graduated. How did you feel? What was that?
Oh man, I was ecstatic. You know, my eldest I graduated from Chief Leshai. My daughter graduated from Chief Leshai, and now my son is, and my youngest will be on the same road. So it was huge.
Weeks earlier, another dream was realized. Moses became the state champion in track and field, 110-meter hurdles.
Moody, baby, state champ!
At a time when the nation's public education system is on a long road to recovery, Moody's success and the success of Chief Leshai schools is a win worth celebrating, one the Federal Bureau of Indian Education wanted to know more about.
They asked us to please share what it was that contributed to all of the success.
When we got the community all together, working together with your leadership and with your parents and the school and the different programs that are open to our internships, how can we not be successful?
I'm born right here in Washington State, Tacoma, Washington, actually a block away from where we're sitting right now.
TVW's Washington to Washington Blake Decision episode has won the NATOA Award of Excellence.
Tacoma was a lot different then. It was on the precipice of thriving. And then crack cocaine came and decimated my community.
Winning this prestigious national award is not only an honor, but a validation of our commitment to excellence in journalism. Check out this hard-hitting episode examining Washington's drug possession policy at tvw.org. We're grateful for this acknowledgement and look forward to continuing to serve our viewers with the highest standards of journalism.
We're gleaning for solutions to these problems.
He was a truly happy kid, always smiled.
Jenny and Steve Douglas could talk about their son Drew endlessly.
We're happy to talk about him because we loved him that much. He was a very big part of the family.
Very kind, lots of friends, liked sports but wasn't really competitive. He just wanted to be part of a team, but just truly loving kid.
The 14-year-old loved to golf.
Sure. And then you just introduce yourself. You'll just be up here. You want to see? You want me to start? Hi, thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm Lori Jenkins, Speaker of the House of Representatives. Just make a couple opening remarks. I think the House Democrats really hit the ground running over the last, 9 days that we've been going here. You may have heard in my opening day speech, one of our big priorities is strong communities and affordable housing. The rent stabilization bill was heard the first day of session. It's already been moved out of committee. So we're excited to keep that bill pressing forward this year. Likewise, we have a bill filed by Rep. Dolio that would require safe storage of firearms in vehicles and in homes. So we're doing kind of good work, I think, in that area. In the jobs and economic growth area, we've got a lot of bills in the post-secondary education committee, which are really focused on getting more workforce available, because we have these shortages across every kind of group of workers you can imagine, and this is a problem nationally. But we have a number of compacts, everything from cosmetology to respiratory care providers. I think Rep. Scott actually filed a bill, which I will look at, is very intriguing, saying that you can't require a driver's license for jobs where you're not required to drive in the job. And that's, again, another way to open more jobs up to more people. So those are just a couple examples of things that we're pressing forward on. I think we're very focused on what we've been focused on for 25 years since we've been in the majority in the House, which is making sure that no matter what else happens, we are looking at trying to make things better for working families in this state, for kids in this state, for communities both large and small in this state. And our feeling is that if we continue to be focused on that at all times, then the challenges that we have, which we know we've got great ones with the budget this year, the challenges that we have we'll be able to address successfully as long as we stay focused on the people.
I'm Jamie Peterson. I'm the Senate Majority Leader. I'm happy to say that we have substantial overlap between the priorities for the House Democrats and the Senate Democrats, in particular in terms of housing. I think we're very much looking forward to seeing the rent stabilization bill and to working with the House on a whole series of measures to increase housing supply. The other major priority for our caucus is K-12 education funding, funding for public schools. And tomorrow in the Senate Early Learning and K-12 Education Committee, they're going to be hearing 4 bills on the big 3, special education funding, material supplies and operating costs funding for school districts, and transportation funding. So, notwithstanding the budget challenge that the Speaker referred to, I think we are absolutely committed to finding the resources to make sure that our 295 school districts and the 1.1 million kids who are in public school have the resources that they need to succeed and thrive. So we're got our sleeves rolled up and are really digging in, looking forward to working together to try to make life better for all of the people who live in our state.
The thing I should have started off with was also introducing House Majority Leader Joe Fitzgibbon.
And Deputy Majority Leader Moncadingra.
And we're open to your questions.
Oh, and sorry again. And the other Deputy Majority Leader, Liz Loveland, is here as well.
And folks, if you could start by introducing yourself and your organization today, just some please. They're really great. We're ready for questions.
I'm Jeannie Lindsay with KOW Public Radio. Wanted to roll back a little bit to last week when now Governor Bob Ferguson was giving his speech. Looking out around the room, Democrats seemed much less enthused compared to the other side of the aisle. I just wanted to ask where you might see some points of contention or friction or concerns that you have about some of the things that Ferguson said or maybe didn't say in his inaugural speech, just sort of searching for how y'all are responding and what you're hearing from your members right now.
I mean, I think he highlighted a number of bills that he's interested in that my members support in his speech. I guess the way that I think about it is he was giving his speech in the first minutes after he was sworn in. We have a lot of challenges this year, especially with the budget. He's got to develop, get recommendations from his agencies and things like that. So I think we continue to look forward to working with him in terms of hearing his budget priorities. And also in terms of, I think we have a common goal to first make sure we're scrubbing the budget really closely and going through that. So I don't think he's gotten his recommendations back from state agencies yet. So we're looking forward to seeing some of those recommendations from him. And I think, we'll continue to build our relationship all through this session in the next 4 years. And one of our bigger challenges will be getting to a budget that really serves the people of this state in the way they should be treated.
I guess I agree with all of what the speaker said. I will also say that, I went to, I think, 5 fundraisers of Governor Ferguson's over the last year. And I've known him for 29 years. So maybe I'm less surprised by hearing someone who was caricatured by a lot of Republicans as being an extreme lefty, anti-Trump, progressive warrior. It turns out that's not exactly who he is, and I think that's great. He's very serious about taking a look at the budget and scrubbing, and guess what? That's exactly consistent with what we've been saying we were going to be doing for months, given the shortfall that we face. So I think, maybe the Republicans were more surprised and delighted to hear that he's someone who comes in with a value of bipartisanship and who's going to be looking seriously at the expenditures that the state has. And I think we believe in the value of bipartisanship as well, and we're going to be looking seriously at the expenditures. So,
can I just follow up on that? Jerry Cornfield, Washington State Standard. I guess the Senator Dingler and Lieutenant Fitzgibbon, I would ask your thoughts, because it does feel like you have new members, and it does feel like he ignored or dismissed pretty much the last 12 years of accomplishments of the Democratic caucus in the legislature and the movement you've made on issues, not acknowledging the gains of early learning in education, in climate, in human services and health care. You may not at this table, but talking to your members, did they not feel like he ignored all the gains that you guys have talked about for the last 12 years?
Jerry, I'll just tell you, I've just been so proud of the work we've been doing in Washington when it comes to access to mental health, substance use disorder, taking care of some of the most, the poorest in our state, our LGBTQI individuals. I think if he went and started to list all the accomplishments we have done in the state of Washington, we would have been there for hours. So I also don't think it's, there's only so much you can say. And I think you have to. He can say anything. He can say any of that. Agreed. But I think to Senator Peterson's point, I do think that there was this persona that the right had created about who Bob Ferguson was. And I think his speech actually helped break that. He is a serious individual who is going to take the budget challenges seriously. And given what we know of him, he is going to stand up to make sure that we are taking care of the most vulnerable amongst us. He's only been in office a week. And I think the devil's always going to be in the details. So I'm looking forward to seeing what his agencies come up with when they're taking a look at cuts. And I think that's just how the conversation starts. But I think it is important for him to acknowledge and for all of us to acknowledge that in the state of Washington, we have very high bipartisanship. In the last 7 years that I've been here, we've had 95% of our bills in the Senate be bipartisan. And last year, my gun bill was bipartisan. So I think those are the good stories coming out of Washington, but we have so many great stories. It would take us hours to go through all the great work, but I think what he said was important in setting up the stage moving forward, that we do want to work together. We want to make sure that we're all moving in the right direction, that we are going to stand up for all Washingtonians and really make sure that people feel safe and that we are setting them up for success.
Do you want to?
Well, I'll just say, our members are very proud of the work that we have done in recent years on child care, on behavioral health, on climate change, on gun violence prevention. And, we're going to continue that work this session. I think our members also understand that, just because they didn't hear about those priorities in that speech doesn't, as you heard from Senator Dingra, right, he couldn't cover every priority in his speech. Our members understand that they'll be working with his administration on all those issues to make forward progress this year.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add that in context, Governor Ferguson sat through, as Attorney General, the State of the State the previous day from Governor Inslee, which was largely focused on the accomplishments of the last 12 years. And so it's not surprising that he would take his day, the following day, to be more forward-focused. And it's absolutely true that many of the accomplishments of which we are proud are ones on which we collaborated, and the gun violence prevention is a good example of that. His office played a leading role in developing the agenda and advancing those bills that we worked on over the last few years.
I'm Taylor Richmond with the Washington News Publishers Association. You talked about education funding. I'm curious, do you feel there's also work that needs to be done with helping students meet math standards, reading standards, other educational outcomes?
Those things are intimately connected, right? The fact is that if you have teachers who are not well trained, or if you have class sizes that are too big, or if you have inadequate budget to purchase curriculum, which is part of materials, supplies, and operating costs, then you're going to have trouble meeting standards. So absolutely, we need to do a better job of funding public schools and making sure that they have adequate resources. And I think that it will follow as we do that our standards will continue to improve.
I think, improving outcomes, educational outcomes, has been a high goal for the House Democrats, and I think this is an area where we can achieve a lot of bipartisanship, because I hear from both Senator Braun and Representative Stokesbury that those are priorities for them too. I think in addition to the school funding issue, one of the things that we are always thinking about in terms of students' ability to be successful, especially again in a challenging budget environment like what we're in. Listen, when you could have the best school system in the world, and if you're sending hungry kids who don't have a stable home to school, their outcomes are not going to be great, no matter how great the school is. So we have to be balanced in how we approach all of these issues, and making sure that we are doing things in a robust way to make sure that we're supporting the underpinnings of kids' lives so that they can have better educational outcomes.
Carlene Johnson, Center Square. I want to ask about some potential tax increase proposals. Governor Ferguson has suggested, he doesn't want to think about that now. He wants to find efficiencies and then go from there. But we've got anything from a payroll tax to wealth tax to increases in property taxes, B&O taxes. What is the majority looking at for tax proposals? And if, in fact, making Washington more affordable for all of us is the plan, how do you sort of reconcile that?
Well, first of all, I want to be very clear that what we've always said, and I think what the Senate Democrats have always said, is the first thing that we have to do is go through reduction exercises in the budget and scrub the budget. That's the first thing. So in the House, we haven't landed at all on a particular proposal. I think there's the list you've just given, and there's probably a lot of other ideas there. One of the challenges Washington has had over its long history of any taxes that are passed is that we are a highly regressive state. And so making sure that wealthy corporations and wealthy individuals are paying their fair share of taxes will always be something that will guide us in any sort of revenue that we look at.
The only thing I'll add to that is that in addition to scrubbing the budget, which we are doing and do every year, but are doing it with an eye towards reductions this year, we also scrub the tax code and we look at tax exemptions that may not be achieving a public purpose. Maybe they were intended to, but they once did, but no longer are. And so we don't just look at the budget. We also look at, if there's tax exemptions that are leading to higher burdens on working people, have to shoulder more of the cost of paying for K-12 education or paying for behavioral health, then that's also a place that we look to first.
I don't have much to add. I think we're largely aligned.
Yeah, Laura Lefkovich, Washington State Standard. I have an environment ag-related question I'm hoping someone can comment on. The ag committees are receiving briefings this week on a report on the Fish and Wildlife Commission that came out last month, I think, that said that there was dysfunction within the commission and that there should be some reforms. I'm wondering if anyone in your caucuses or any of you are thinking about that, if there is any appetite for changes, legislative reforms to the commission, including making it a cabinet agency, and just kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, there is discussion on that in our caucus. I think that you likely will see a bill to make the Department of Fish and Wildlife a cabinet agency. The Ruckelshaus House report had three possible reform solutions, of which that was one. I do think that the commission has struggled at times in recent years. I actually think their functioning has gotten much better since the last round of appointments, in part just because the time that I remember them struggling the most is when they didn't have a full complement of commissioners. I do think that the governance structure is a little bit rusty, and you could choose to make it a cabinet agency. I think you could also choose to just tighten up the functioning of the commission. I know one proposal I've seen in the past, which is probably not viable this year, but is useful to think about at least, is what if the commission had its own staff and wasn't directly staffed by the director? Now we're probably not adding a lot of new FTEs to the Fish and Wildlife Commission this year, but that is one idea that would help give them the ability to have their own independent source of information, just like our legislative branch receives independent information separate from the executive branch. Some of the qualifications required of the commissioners, I think, may inadvertently limit the diversity of views that they are represented there. But I don't think that we've settled on a path. I also don't think it's necessary that this year be the year that we reform the governance structure of Fish and Wildlife. But I do think that it is something that our members, particularly on the Ag and Natural Resources Committee, are talking about looking at.
Bill Lucia with the Washington State Standard also. So yesterday was obviously President Trump's first day in office. We saw him signing dozens of executive orders. Just any thoughts on how that might change your to-do lists or priorities in the session ahead, or is it still too early to know? And then as kind of a related question, any reaction to the lawsuit that Attorney General Nick Brown is planning to file today on the birthright citizenship order?
I think in my opening day comments, I, highlighted that we were expecting that the Trump administration would really confront in a very negative way some of Washington State's values, and that we are fully committed to protecting Washington's values. I can't even, I don't know all of the executive orders yet that he signed yesterday. Some of them will have a legal effect. Some of them were just intended to hurt people, even without a legal effect. We are not interested in that at all here. When I talked to Attorney General Brown last evening, and he talked to me about the birthright citizenship lawsuit and his intention to file it, I expressed a strong support for his doing so. I think that we will be very focused on protecting the constitutional rights of Washingtonians from beginning to end this year and every year. we'll again do the things that we need to do to protect Washington's values, and we'll continue to try and work on that. We want to be as proactive as we can be, and not be reactive. And I think you'll see, you see bills, Representative Mena's bill about National Guard troops and things like that, which we're doing in a proactive way to make sure that we are, again, protecting Washingtonians' values.
I agree about protecting Washington values, and I also want to emphasize that we have our own job to do. We have a budget to balance. We have a lot of ideas for policy, and we're, I think, not going to allow ourselves to be distracted by the chaos machine in Washington, D.C. We're going to stay focused on meeting the needs of folks in Washington. And sometimes those things will overlap. So, for example, we have a set of bills that was being heard this morning in the Early Learning and K-12 Education Committee that have to do with making sure that Washington schools are safe environments for all students, including transgender students. And so we will continue on that work that has been a long theme for us and for our caucuses.
Yeah, I would strongly echo what Senator Peterson said about us not getting distracted by what's happening in D.C. and the antics of, whether it's Donald Trump or any of his cohort. But some of the, so we just try not to think about him every day. But some of the moves he announced yesterday, withdrawing the United States from the Paris Climate Accord, doesn't really change the work that we have to do here in Washington to reduce our own emissions, but it does send a loud signal to the rest of the world that, you don't have a partner in, in fighting climate change in the federal government, but also that, that state governments are where that progress needs to happen, which has been true before. It was true 8 years ago when he made the same announcement. I think it increases the urgency for us to make sure that our foundational climate laws are working as intended, and that the revenues generated by Climate Commitment Act auctions are going to investments that reduce greenhouse gas emissions the most, which was already our goal, but I think it makes that a more urgent goal. And then some of the other moves that he's made, it's interesting to see him declare national energy emergency at the same time as placing a moratorium on a whole new source of energy in the form of offshore wind, and announcing tariffs on Canadian and Mexican oil. Particularly, if we see tariffs on oil from Alberta, that will very directly impact gas prices in Washington. And I just think it's important that we see that coming, and that we be prepared to help Washingtonians deal with the impacts of Trump tariffs.
And I'll just add, we did a lot of work in 2017, 2018, 2019 to make sure we were protecting Washingtonians. Keep Washington Working was a big bill in doing just that. And I was actually very pleased to hear Steve Strand from WASPIC, actually on KUOW, talking about how law enforcement is there to enforce the laws of the state of Washington and not be agents of ICE. And, in access to women's right to choose, in gender-affirming care, LGBTQI individuals, we have done a lot to protect all of these issues, and we will continue to do so. But I think many of the bills that we worked during those times are the ones that we're going to make sure we enforce now as a state.
Sophia Schwartzwalder with the Seattle Times. The bill that includes Ferguson's proposal for $100 million in funding for police hiring was discussed this morning. There seems to be a lot of support for it, but a couple of people have voiced, I guess, just some hesitation around putting a Band-Aid on a really big problem that's been going on for a while. So just sort of hoping to hear a little bit from you guys about whether you feel like this bill is a good first step and that funding is going to be a launching pad, or if it's not quite going to address some of the issues that are already there aside from hiring.
So we heard that bill, as you said, in Warren Justice today, and I think what's been very clear, actually, it comes down to funding. right? The cities and counties telling us that it is very hard for them to fund positions. I know that the governor made a promise for $100 million. And the bill that we heard is for funding for 3 years, right? And so you had the cities and counties say, what then? What are we going to do after 3 years? Who's going to continue payment? So we have to take a look at how services are funded throughout the entire state. The budget issues we're dealing with are not just at the statewide level, it's also at the city level, at the county level. And those are the tough decisions we will be making. So there is an understanding that we need to hire law enforcement. There's also an understanding from both sides, all sides, that we also need co-response models. We have 988 that's going out. We have co-responders with law enforcement and social workers. We have firefighters that go out. So we're taking a look at all the response that is needed to help the people of Washington. I do think that when we have dollars that are going out from the state, there need to be some qualifications around it. We want to make sure that the agencies who receive these dollars are committed in enforcing Keep Washington Working. We want to make sure that they have completed all the training requirements that the state mandates for them, which includes trauma-informed care, making sure they have use of force policies, making sure that they are indeed enforcing surrender of firearm forms. So I think this is really a great opportunity to make sure that there's consistency in how law enforcement is operating throughout the state. So the bill was heard today. It is on the exec list for Thursday, and so we'll just see where it goes after that.
I would add that it's an important issue. It's one that's good that we're looking at, but it isn't the problem everywhere. In Seattle, for example, where we have 1,300 police officers that are funded, we have 900 police officers. And why is that? It's not because there's a lack of money or a lack of a new state grant program. It's because we have a significant workforce challenge. Now, over the last few years, the Law and Justice Committee and the legislature have done, under great leadership from Senator Lovick, really important work to broaden that workforce development, to set up additional sites for training by the Criminal Justice Training Commission to produce more peace officers. But as Speaker Jenkins noted in the opening, we have a whole range of places where we have significant workforce challenges. And so we have to recognize that as we decide where best to put the dollars that we have, limited dollars that we have at the state level, that is an area that we should continue to focus on and not neglect.
And that's the other bill that was heard in committee today, was another bill by Senator Lovick that expands the eligibility of everyone who is authorized to work in law enforcement. So now it's gone to the point where it's anyone who has a legal work authorization in Washington. So we earlier used to be in a position where it was only citizens, and it was opened up to green card holders. I think last year we wanted to expand it to DACA recipients, and now we're really saying anyone who is authorized to work in the United States, law enforcement would love to recruit them to work for them. So we are taking a look at that workforce issue, as Senator Peterson said. And that is true across the entire spectrum of the workforce, not just specifically law enforcement. You take a look at prosecutors, defense, judges, you take a look at doctors, nurses. It's across the entire board.
I'll just add in a couple of data points here. So the regional training academies that Senator Peterson and Senator Dingreff mentioned. So this biennium, we will train 540 more law enforcement officers through the opening of those regional training facilities than we trained the last biennium. Last biennium, it took about 8 months to get somebody into and through a training because there was a backlog for local governments. We are now down to 30 days or less for a new law enforcement officer to get in and be trained. So we're having a great deal of success at our local academies, and Tacoma has a similar, I don't remember the numbers in Tacoma, but has a similar problem to Seattle. They have plenty of officers funded. It's the workforce shortage of baby boomers retiring that are creating an inability to fill those positions. And so speeding up the training is the thing that will help in many, many areas.
I have a question as well. Senator Peterson, can you walk us through where do you see special ed going? What are the goals? You have a bill, there's another bill. What's the path on special education this session? What do you want to accomplish? And correct me if I'm wrong, but both bills are identified as part of basic education. So are you setting yourself up to be sued if you don't fully fund it and acknowledge it's part of basic ed? Are you setting?
Well, Jerry, you're talking about services for children in our public schools who have disabilities that are required by federal law and by state law to be provided for them. So I guess my question back to you is, how can that be anything other than basic education? We are in a position already where we should expect to be sued if we fail to provide the money to provide an amply fund education for kids with disabilities. So, the basics of the bills, and this is true of Representative Paulette's bill as well as the bills that Senator Wellman and I have, the basics are the same. Eliminating the cap on the number of students who can be identified as needing services, increasing the multiplier to better approximate what the actual cost is of providing services to kids with disabilities, and strengthening the safety net program so that districts don't wind up shouldering out of their enrichment levies costs for kids who are more expensive than the multiplier. Now, how much of that we can actually fund this year, I'm not sure. That'll be part of the budget discussion. But every school district that I have talked to tells me that a significant amount of their extra resources that ought to be available for enrichment is now going to pay for the needs of kids with disabilities. And I don't see how you can argue with a straight face that that is anything other than basic education.
Any other questions?
I've got one more budget-related question. In 2021, House Bill 1168, this was the bill that provided $500 million of wildfire-related funding over 8 years. There's some concerns now that funding could be targeted for or could be shortchanged, I guess, in this more tight budget environment. What's the level of support in your caucuses for maintaining that $125 million per biennium level for that funding?
I don't think we've lessened our understanding of the need for wildfire prevention. We know it's much easier to prevent wildfires with pre-commercial thinning and prescribed burns than it is to react to a wildfire, to put out a wildfire, to recover, a destroyed community from a wildfire. Obviously, the fires in Los Angeles, are a very immediate reminder of that. I don't think there's anything magic about $125 million. I think, we will always be looking, we have to look at all of our investments in the context of all the other investments. And, I'm sure we'll be working with Commissioner Up the Grove and his staff to make sure that we're allocating dollars to the highest and best uses that do the most to prevent forest fires. I do think that we have started to see some progress. This was not a particularly bad fire season in Washington. There were fires. I don't want to downplay the harm caused by, particularly the fire in Stehekin, but overall, and some of that is weather conditions. But prevention is a great investment. We'll continue to invest in that, and we'll be doing the most we can there in the context of all of our other needs. That is also a place we've invested CCA dollars. We don't have the same sort of fund balance in our CCA accounts that we had the last 2 years, but that's definitely an area where there's significant overlap between our climate work and our just emergency prevention, response and prevention work.
So it sounds like still a priority, but not 100% sure that it's not an area where you might see some cutbacks.
It's absolutely a priority, and it's too early to say where we might see cutbacks. But we have to look at every single line item in the budget, and probably there will be many areas that we don't fund at the level that we wish we were funding. I don't know yet if that's one of them.
You could say everything that you just said about wildfires and say about childcare.
Yeah, yeah, about almost any topic.
Everything.
We hit on about many topics. So we're 9 days in. We're working on the scrub. No one has said let's just eliminate that.
And there's nothing in the budget that we could say we're not going to look at, right? There's nothing that we could say we're definitely not going to cut that, other than things that are constitutionally protected.
Which is why this is hard.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're all set. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.